Hello, this is Martin Koistinen. I'm here to do another screencast for Django-cms. It's been a bit of time since I've done the last one, but I'd like to pick up again using the same project that we've been using. Now, since I did the last screencast, we have a new CMS release, version 3.2, and I have upgraded this project from 3.1 to 3.2. And one of the first things that you'll notice when you um, get it running is that the toolbar now contains a new button called Create, and that's what we're going to talk about in this particular screencast is the new content creation wizards that the CMS offers. Now, normally the CMS start. Just one second. I'm going to disable this because I want to show you how it starts. So normally the CMS ships with a couple of wizards that are already useful in any project. So we have a new page wizard and we have a new subpage wizard. Now they do basically the same thing. The only thing that's different is where they start. So if I do a new page, it will create a new page at the same level as the current page that I'm on. And if I do new subpage, it will create a new subpage to the page that I'm on. I'm going to go ahead and show you that one because it's a little bit, a little bit more involved. Only slightly, just goes where the page ends up is the only difference. So you just click on that and then you can click next, or you can just double click this if you choose. And it will take you to a very simple form for creating a new page. You can see it has 1, 2, 3 fields, and that's it. Now, you CMS developer veterans are probably well familiar with the normal Django admin dialog that appears when you create a new page in any other method, which contains not only one form but also the advanced form for creating settings like app hooks and menus and overrides and who knows what. So the goal of the wizards, the content creation wizards, is just to make it easy for your content managers, your content creation people to do their job. So they don't want to wade through two forms in the normal method of creating a page. They just want to come in here and type in new page, and they can ignore the slug, and then maybe provide some default content or some initial content for that page. So here I'm slapping in some lorem ipsum, and you can see it's got paragraphs. I'm going to go ahead and take this first sentence and make that a subhead, and then maybe we have some bolded text here and some emphasized text over here, just to show you that it's a rich text experience. So yeah, I've provided a title, I've provided some content. Let's hit create and see what happens. So what happens is we basically create the page and we go to it. So you can see we're now at the new page, and that is beneath. I've already done this once. You can see that it's located underneath the page that I started from, and it's a really good way using those two wizards to build out your content of your site very quickly and your menu structure, right? So you can create new menu, new top level items by going to the top level and creating a new page, or you can go and create sub items, and you can build out the whole thing that way if you choose. That's great. It's already a very useful tool in Django CMS 3.2 and up. What I'd like to talk to you about today in this screencast, though, is how you can add custom wizards to your projects so that you can flesh out that wizard experience for all different content types in your project, not just pages. So we have in this example project, which admittedly is very ugly and we never meant it for to be anything but it does contain a number of app hooks. So we have a product gallery, we have a leadership, which is a staff app that we talked about previously. We have a news app, which is basically a very simple blogging app that we put together. And I think that we have, here's another, this is a top level page that I created with the wizard earlier. We have a contact us page, which I believe is also an app hook with just a form on it. But we're going to talk a little bit about the news app hook. So remember, this is an app hook. That means, what an app hook means, if you're not familiar, is that this is a Django application, and the CMS has provided a mechanism to allow that application to control the URL structure beneath this entry point. So the entry point was defined at the news page, and then everything below that is under the control of news. So for example, if I were to click on this article here, we're now going to go to a new quote-unquote page, but really it's a object within the news application, and it looks just like a page, but really this doesn't exist in the CMS. It only exists in the news application. It just integrates so nicely that you can't tell the difference. Why am I going into all that explanation? Because I want to show you what happens if I go to an app hook like news and I click on create. We can see we only have one of the two wizards we had a minute ago. So we can only create a new page here, which basically will create a sister page to news. I cannot create the sub page because that would be a little bit nonsensical to create a sub page inside of an app hook. And it may even cause errors. So we have some permission checking in the wizard system, which I'm about to show you. And we use that to say, hey, if we're on an app hook or we're underneath an app hook, don't show the subpage wizard because that doesn't make sense. So I just want you to see that real quick. Now let's show you the implemented wizard that I made before making the screencast, and talk about it a little bit. So here it is, and I'm gonna uncomment it, and you can see it's just a couple lines of code here, right? So basically this is just meta. This right here is just for Python 3 compatibility. I'm currently running 2.7, not that it matters. This is only if you're using you know, translatable text for your project. So that leaves us with these lines of code, which is what, 10 lines, if even. And then we create a wizard with that. Now that's a little bit deceptive because there's a lot of stuff that we're going to show and talk about in the form that we're adding right here, but that's beside the point. Just for right now, this is how easy it is to create a wizard. And let's go ahead and look at that wizard. I'm going to save, come over here, reload the page, make sure that the web server is restarted, and I'm going to hit create. So what do we see? Okay, we have the new page, which we had a moment ago, but we have a new one, new news article, which creates a new news item instance. Not crazy about that description, but we'll get to that in a minute. Let's see what it looks like. I'm going to click on this. Actually, you know what? I'm going to back up for just 1 second. Before we get into that, I want to show you what it normally takes to create a new news item. And I'm going to go all the way to the Django admin because I think that's kind of the purest form. So here's news item. We create one. We have a pretty big form here. We got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 different fields that we might complete. Not all of them are required. Some of them are optional. But it's a pretty daunting form. If I just want to get in here and quickly create a news article, maybe this is a bit much. So having seen what it normally requires, and you know, in previous screencasts we showed how you can basically do this, and this already was really cool. But it's the same 12 fields you still have to manipulate in order to create a new news item. So the wizard takes it a step further. So now when I hit this and I hit this, we have 1, 2, 3 fields, and we're going to get a news article. Let's demonstrate. So new news article. Just like before, we have a rich text field that we can use. I'm just going to, you know, I'm not going to format it all again. I'm just going to put some paragraphs in so you can see that it is rich text. And then we have to choose a category. In this case, we only have one, but we could have multiple here, and you have to choose one. That's just the way that the news items model is defined. So now we hit create, and we can see we now have a new news article. We didn't have to manipulate 12 fields. We only manipulated 3. And we're now also in edit mode, ready to add images to it, or oops, I made a typo kind of thing, or whatever. It's already published. It already has now as the publishing date, and things are really quick and easy. So let's look and see what happened there. Going back to the wizard, we see we have a few lines of code where we're defining the title. We did see that and we did like it. We have a weight. The weight is simply a way of determining the sort order of all the wizards. The CMS wizards are in the 100 range. I just put 300 here so that it goes after the CMS wizards. And then we have form, and like I said earlier, we're hiding some of the complexity in that form, and I'll show you that in a moment. But another keyword that we can use is description. And I'm going to go ahead and change that now because I really didn't like the description we had a moment ago. I'm going to change this to create new news article. I think that's better than new news item instance, which is a little technical sounding. And I'm just going to go ahead and save that, and then I'm going to show you that it does indeed change the description of the wizard. You can see right here, create new news article. So that's just one tiny way that we can maybe personalize our wizard. Now I'm going to separate this from these because I just want you to know that these three are required init parameters for a wizard, and description is not, it's optional. The system will automatically try to create the description for you based on the content type that you're creating. In this case, we're creating a news item. How does it know that? How does it know that? Well, it knows that because we're providing a model form. So let's have a look at that. The create news article form is what we're importing from forms, so we can go to forms and we can see that. So here's this create news article form. And you can see indeed that it is a model form. So in that model, because it's a model form, we know that it's going to have a model parameter defined in meta. Not a parameter, but a property defined in the meta class. So we know that's how the wizard can learn which content type it's using in the wizard. So in a normal model form, as you're probably familiar, is you can define which fields from the model you're going to show, or if you don't want to do that because it's complicated or you have a lot, you can actually do exclude. And some of the simpler wizards you'll create will simply do this, basically exclude none, meaning include all of them, and you'll essentially get the same thing as the admin form. Not exactly, but pretty close. I mean, it's still the same complexity. You would still have 12 fields you have to manipulate. The goal of a wizard should be to simplify, distill down the creation of that particular content type to its simplest form. In this case, I know I need a headline, I need content, and I need categories. Now, before we go any further, because there's some complexity I want to show you in the save method, first thing you should know is that everything in here is a normal model form. There's nothing special about wizards here. It's just a normal model form. The only thing that we're doing special is we're including this mixin from CMS wizard forms base import base form mixin. This mixin here will simply give you access to some preconditions. So which page are we on, what user is using the wizard, and what language they're using. I think that's all that you get from using the base form mixin. And to tell you the truth, we're not actually using any of that stuff in this particular implementation. But I just want you to be clear, this is the only thing that's special about this model form for creating a wizard. The other thing I want you to know is that in the normal implementation of this particular app, which is the news app, we don't actually have a place to store content directly. What we have instead is a placeholder field which allows us to put any number of plugins that we want. And in fact, the normal implementation of news item, I'm going to show you that real quick. So here's where we store the content of the news item, and it's a placeholder field, which basically means it's another placeholder, and you can put any plugins you want in there. And to take it a step further, the normal implementation of this particular model is that we create automatically on creation, we create a new text plugin and we give it this text, news body coming soon. And that was something we talked about in a previous episode, just to make it easier on your users. Now, those are important facts for this because I just want to show you this and I don't want you to be turned away by the length of it. There's only a few things that we're doing in here. Let me step through it. So we're taking care of some of the defaults. So in this case, we're, create the article as normal. We're going to set publish to true. If you're using the wizard, we assume you want to publish the article, so we're going to set it to true. I didn't have to do this. I could have put published up here as another field, and then we'd have one more field that we have to manipulate in the form, but you could do that. In this case, I just chose to make it super simple for my content managers and editors by setting publish to true automatically. Now, slug is a required field, so we have to set that. So what I'm doing here is I'm basically using the built-in Django slugify method, and I'm basically slugifying the existing headline that was provided in the form. And if everything worked out, then we're done with that. But if for whatever reason the slug didn't get created, in many cases it could be that they're using a non-Latin language, so it will become slugified to basically an empty string. Not cool. So in that case, I will go ahead and create my own slug, in this case news article followed by the primary key of the object. Probably not important for this, but it's kind of complete, if you will. The next thing is, remember, we don't really have a place to store the textual content that somebody just provided in the form. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to have to put that into the placeholder. So normally what I would do is down here is just simply add a plugin, a text plugin with the contents that we just typed in. But what I want to do is go a step further, and knowing that up here when I created this article, the normal implementation would have already created a default text plugin that contains the text news body coming soon. So what I did is I'm going through the existing placeholder, I'm finding all the plugins, I find the one that contains that, which should be the only one, and then I simply replace that text with whatever was provided in this form. The only thing that maybe also you might need to know is that I'm only doing any of this if they provided any news body content in that content field, and they have permissions to manipulate the plugins, the text plugins in the CMS. So if the user doesn't have permission to create text plugins, then I shouldn't really be doing any of this stuff anyway, in which case they'll get a news body that contains news body coming soon, and they'll have to go find somebody who has permission to add stuff to do it. But that's it. So this is really where in your wizards, so you can see down here, I'm just basically saving the article if it needs to be saved, and that's it. So all of the wizardy stuff happens here in the save method of the form. Now, it's not the only place where wizardy stuff might happen. As I said earlier, when you're creating this, one of the fields that's required is categories, and there's only one defined. So I think if I wanted to take it one step further, what I might do is add categories to the field list like I've done now, but then in the init of this particular form, I might say, well, if we really only have one category, then remove that field so we don't have to bother the user with it. And then later in the save, I would set it to the one available value. So it would make it even easier. But I think that's really beyond the scope of this screencast. But something to think about if you're creating your own wizards. Okay, so we have the wizard created. This works. I just showed it to you. It works great. Yeah. So there's one other thing I want to show you, and that is all the simplicity here. I want to show you a little bit more. I mean, this is legitimate. There's nothing wrong with this, but I want to show you some of the other options you might have. So I'm going to replace all of this with identical acting code, but instead of it looking simple, it's now going to look a little bit complex. And it's only because I have the default implementations of some of the other features in here, just so you can see. Now earlier, we already overrode the description keyword arg on instantiating a new wizard. And we added, I think it was create new news article. So I'm going to put that back. I'm going to show you there's 3 other parameters that you could use. I'm not sure why I'm getting these spaces here. Okay, here we go. So model is basically the model of the underlying content type that you're creating. Now, we don't have to provide this because we're using a model form. If we weren't using a model form, we were using a regular form, then we would we would have to tell the wizard what kind of model we're operating on, and that's what this keyword arg is for. But to reiterate, since we are using a model form, we actually don't have to define this, so I'm going to leave it commented out. Edit mode on success I'm going to talk about in a minute, but keep your eye on it. And template name. Template name is really for really advanced users. You're probably not going to have to manipulate that. But what it is basically the form itself will be rendered on a template, and the template is already created in the CMS, and it works great. If for some reason you need to change it, you can. It's there. But really in 99.9% of the cases, you're not going to have to affect that template, so don't even bother. Now, the other thing you may notice is that I'm actually not instantiating a wizard anymore, but instead I'm instantiating a news blog article wizard. So what is that? Well, it's simply a subclass of wizard that I created so that I could have all of these, an opportunity to provide my overridden methods. So I'm just basically putting in here kind of stub implementations of each of these things. So when I say stub, I mean that in each case it simply calls the superclass and does whatever it does. So these are, I could basically delete all of these and it would be exactly the same as it is now. But I'm putting them here just so you can see what they do. So get title, what that does is it allows you to programmatically determine the title of the wizard. I don't have a good use case for this, but it's here if you need it. Maybe you want to put the day of the week at the end of the title of the wizard. I don't know. If you did, this is where you would do it. I'm going to go ahead and remove it because we don't need it for right now, but I just want you to see what it is. Get weight. Remember that the weight determines the sort order. Smaller numbers sort to the top or to the left of the wizard menu, and heavier items sort to the bottom or to the right. And you can programmatically determine that. Again, I don't have a good use case for this. Maybe you want to sort things higher in the morning or later in the afternoon. I don't know. But if you did, this is where you would do it. Description, this is useful. The current implementation will introspect the content type that you've declared in model, right? And it will get the natural language name of that model, in this case news item, and then it will basically wrap it into the sentence, create new news item instance. And that's the default description you get. So if you don't provide a description down here, and you don't override this method, that's what will happen. If you would like that to be done differently, this is a great place to do it. You can redefine and override get description to do whatever you need to do. Get success URL I'll talk about in just a moment. And that leaves us with user has add permission. And it has a couple of parameters. Well, in particular, it has user. So what this is this is where you can determine whether this user has permission to see this wizard at all. The default implementation will use the normal Django fine-grained permission system to check to see if the provided user has add permission on the content type that this wizard uses, in this case news item. So if the user is defined in the normal Django permissioning system to access and add a news item, then they will see the wizard. If they don't, then they won't. And that's great. The default implementation is all you need most of the time. But like I was pointing out earlier, there are some cases where you need to do a little bit more, right? So it could be that we do check that the permission is there, but then we also check to see if the conditions are right. So in the earlier example I gave, we don't show the subpage wizard when we're on an app hook because that is nonsensical. And the way we implemented that in the CMS is we overrode this method to do the normal permissions checks, but then on top of that, it says, are we on an app hook? Because if we are, then just return false. And then in which case you don't see, no matter who you are, even the admin, you don't see the subpage wizard. So we don't need that in this particular case. Everybody who has permissions in the normal Django's permission system can add a new news item, so we don't need to do anything with that. And that leaves us with this one other method that we can affect, which is get success URL. So let's talk about this. What happens after the user successfully fills out the form and hits create? What does the what does the system do? So currently what it does, well, let me jump back over here. Currently what it does is it takes the object that you just created, which is passed into this method here as obj, and then it checks to see if it has a method get absolute URL and calls it with the current language. Whatever's returned, it takes that and it appends at the end a question mark edit. And that will basically well, taking all this together, what it will do is it will take the user to the newly created object and put him in edit mode so that now, once he's created a new news article, he can then review it and edit it immediately. And that's kind of the idea of the wizard system for content managers, is that you help them quickly create the content and then they can finesse it a little bit once they get there. That's the normal default behavior. There are definitely some cases where you wouldn't want to do that. The first and easiest thing is maybe you don't really want them to edit the content immediately afterwards, or you really need them to see it in edit, not in edit mode, but preview mode, or whatever mode they started in more specifically. So if that's all you need to do, simply change this, this to false. And basically that will not do the appending of a question mark edit. So it basically won't force them into edit mode. If they're already in edit mode, it will remain that way. But it won't force them into edit mode if they're not already there. So that's the one thing you can do. I personally don't ever really want to use that, so I'm going to leave that commented out. But there are also cases where maybe you're creating an object that doesn't have a URL. Like, for example, I have categories for my news items, and one in particular I have is press releases. So maybe I have another wizard where I'm creating new categories, and maybe those categories don't really have a URL in the system, in which case it doesn't make sense to direct them to a place that doesn't exist. You'll just end up getting a 404. So what I would do in that case is I would return none. And the CMS will automatically, that's kind of a special case. If you return none here, then when you're done creating this form, and I guess we can demonstrate it. So I've already set it up. Let's see, new article 2. I'm just going to quickly create one. You'll see what will happen. So remember before, after I created the new article, it took me to the article. In fact, I'm already there. I'm going to back out of this. I'm going to go to the news listing page. Okay. So before, when I created this news article, it actually took me to the article so I could edit it. Now let's start over. Now that we've made this change and we're returning none here, we'll see that what it will do is it will just basically return me to the page I started on. And we can quickly demonstrate that. So I create it, and here I am still in the news listing. So I didn't go or even try to go to that object's get absolute URL. I just simply returned the user to where they started from. And this might be useful for many reasons, including preserving the visual context of the user or whatever. But in this case, it's a good demonstration. So that's a good case of when you might need to use that. I'm going to go ahead and comment it out because, again, I don't need that. And so that means my class is empty. And since it's empty, I don't really need to create it. So I'm going to go back to, I'm going to go back to just using the base wizard. And that's all about wizards. I hope that you find them as useful as we do, and that you find them as easy to create as I just showed you, and that you can make your content managers' lives easier in your projects. Thank you.